team think it's really critical when we are having conversations that deal with race or the impact of bias or microaggressions or all of these terms that we are frequently talking about, that we need to establish some norms. So we think it's really important to establish this. So we want to just show you some of these. Obviously, we want to speak clearly, and we want to respect those who are making comments in the box or who have sent us questions to talk about. Sometimes there's not always a final answer or a perfect response, perfect solution. So sometimes messiness occurs, and so some willingness to be told politely but firmly, no, that let's correct that. That can be done, but we intend to do that with kindness. We're accountable to ourselves. We're accountable to those with whom we speak. So we always need to be aware of what's coming out of us and be ready to receive, again, that kind but firm pushback. We want to make sure that we are sharing the mic, whether that's the chat box or the speaker in the group. And we really, really, really want you to be active. Ladies from my team, please add on or add something else I might have left out. Avern and Josh Ray?
I think you're good.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to turn this over to one of you all to share this graphic and discuss why we made this choice, why we designed it the way we did, what might have motivated it.
Josh Ray, you want to take this since it was your brainchild?
Well, I think the idea originally came from a quote that Lamanda found, and we kind of changed the quote around, but I'm such a visual person, and I felt like we needed to have something to capture actually what families and students were dealing with. So when I found out that Avon was able to do some cool things on this Canva, I kind of shared with her what I was envisioning, and our brains and our team brains worked together and created this particular Canva here, which I think is very powerful in a sense.
It's really important to consider what the imagery is suggesting in relation to that quote as well. This whole situation around this pandemic has brought a lot of things to light that need to be discussed, need to be worked out. And at the end of the day, it is very realistic that there are some people experiencing this in a totally different way than somebody else. And there's some research around this kind of being called situated differently. Yes, we're all experiencing this pandemic, but our experiences are vast and varied. And so we just have been sharing this a lot frequently because we want to ensure that our students and their families' humanity and experiences are being recognized first before we make academic and instructional decisions. Anything else, ladies, before we move on?
Right, and even though there's just a few of the things, of course, there are many more things besides hunger, trauma, mental health, abuse, job loss, illness, and so on and so forth. So it just captures some of the things that our students and families are dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we thought today that we would use this opportunity to address a lot of questions that have come our way, either just by way of working with our individual schools and zones or through the form that Avon sent out through Twitter last week, just asking for input. And we tried our best to distill that into a couple frequently asked questions. And then we want to open up the floor to anybody possibly in the chat box, just asking a question that's burning in relation to racial equity, in relation to cultural responsiveness during NTI. So we'll walk through these, and then again, we'll open up that floor, so to speak, to address any other questions that have come our way. So the first one, and I know that so many different zones are dealing with this, what do we do with assessment during NTI? Even I don't know if you want to take that one, or Josh Ray, I'm happy to as well.
Well, I think one of the main things we have to remember as we are dealing with this time, and it goes directly back to the graphic that you and Shasharay just talked through, is that our students are situated differently right now. So if we are assigning grades, what we're really looking at is the amount of privilege a student may have, which is another quote that's been circulating around about this. So when we are looking at assessment during NTI, I think a big part of this is that we take the time as teachers to breathe and to focus on giving genuine feedback to our students so that they are moving towards mastery, even though we're in this very different and kind of surreal time for them.
Excuse me.
And so even I'd like to add on to that, where no matter the grade level, no matter the content, feedback needs to be high quality so students understand where they are and where they're going. But feedback also needs to be customized to the individual. What are their needs? What are their areas of strength? How can we as educators guide them effectively through specific feedback? It's not saying good job. It's not well done. It's you did a great job with such and such skill. Let me help you either continue to improve that or let me give you some guidance as to where you need to go next. So we've just got to be very careful and very specific in how we approach that. Anything else from the team before we move on to the second one?
I think you're great. You're fine. I just want to give a shout out to some of the people that are in the chat. We have my coworkers, Russ Hockenberry and Stephen Durham, and Katia Turner is here from, she's a resource teacher from Zone 1. Welcome. And then we have Miss Jenny Aberley's here, and Deborah Berger, and Evelyn Nicholson, and Yolanda Williams. And we may have even more, but we're really glad that you're watching with us today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So please use that chat box thoughtfully. If something crosses your mind, we want to hear it. So please use that. So next, what are we doing to be responsive to the needs of our students and their families during NTI? And there's a lot of different ways to think about this. And Shasharay, I'm not sure if you maybe want that one, or I can take that too.
Sure, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. The obvious here is that our kids are not in school and they're not with us every single day in the flesh, and they obviously come to school for a variety of reasons, but when we have established relationships that are meaningful to these students, they come to crave that, and they love educator support. And so it's an enormous challenge now. And so we've got to utilize the relationships we have established to know what the needs are and to know how to reach out to our students and their families during this time. And so teachers have had to be creative in how they do get to their individual families and students. We have a family engagement. I don't know if that's a department or if one of my colleagues can speak to that more clearly, but there are people out there who we've been turning to, and I want to say Crystal Hawkins, but please correct me, team, if I'm wrong on that one. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing that we need to take away from this is flexibility and openness and being present, making yourself known to your families and making yourself available. And that means using as many different creative ways of reaching out, whether that's email or Class Dojo or Remind, or allowing your students to send you a picture of their work, or allowing your students to email it at 9 o'clock at night. You may not get to it that very moment, but just adjusting your approach to responsiveness. Team, if you have anything to share, please do.
I would like to also add that you wouldn't know what the needs of your students and families are unless you actually do contact them. One of the things prior to this crisis was our team encouraged teachers to be culturally responsive by making sure that they develop relationships with their students. And oftentimes we will get the question of what does that look like? What does that mean? Well, talk to them, ask them questions, ask them what they like, how do they best learn. And what I find fascinating at this point, no, I wouldn't say fascinating, but somewhat sad, is that there are teachers trying to reach out to families. This has forced them to have to reach out to families when prior to this they were not communicating with families as they should have. So I think the responsiveness to the needs of students are first ask them what they need without assumptions. Oftentimes we assume, based on some of our own bias, what we think students and their families need.
And I think our district is doing a really good job at making sure that we call families. I've received several calls throughout every week from my kids' schools, which is really great. But adding that, I love how you guys said adding that, making sure that you continue that relationship with the kids, and calling and those meets that we have definitely make a difference. And as a parent, it does make a difference. We've also gotten several cards, which is really nice. So those can continue to develop those relationships with our students. So I love that you guys made that point.
Thank you. We're going to head to question 3. The question we receive a lot might relate to what tools can be useful for our PLCs to use when they are making sure that they are providing racial equity through their lessons and learning opportunities, especially during NTI. And so as a resource team, we do have resources, and we developed a list that has been added to the DEP page of the JCPS website. And in there, we modified the ARE, the Affirming Racial Equity tool. It's a comprehensive planning document. We modified it for NTI to be a checklist, and that is available on the DEP page. Lamanda Moore Rodriguez has done a wonderful job this year of combing through volumes and volumes of text and running it through a multicultural checklist to make sure that it meets several different needs, and that list is on the website as well. There is a rubric for looking at books. Maybe Shashre, you want to talk about that? I believe that came from you with NCTE, correct?
Yes. So
okay.
That is listed in the Empowering Classroom Culture piece. And what that is, it's a list of resources that teachers can use that from a racial equity lens. And again, I think it's important that we understand that that is one of the main pillars within the district. But it lists resources in various languages, books that are read to students in various languages. It also has areas related to activities you can do around art, community, activities with ECE students that are all listed under that section of Empowering Classroom Culture. But it's important too that, and the question is discussing tools. What tools can you use? And I think one of the main tools that JCPS definitely has access to is Google. So I think that when you are actually planning, think about the faces of the kids that you see. And again, that the relationship building activity, or that time you spent developing relationship, your students are co-creators with you in the planning, actually, in creating the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So I think that is very, 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 very important in order to move forward in whatever it is that you're trying to teach, is that the ultimate goal is your students. And in order for you to be successful, I think it's very, very, very important that they are co-creating with you, because they'll have more of a buy-in, and they'll feel more appreciated and seen and heard when you do that.
And I think you make a really good point, and by no means am I trying to reduce our students to an object, a tool, but if we're not utilizing that relationship and our knowledge of them as a something to include in our planning, then we're wasting a huge opportunity. So I'm glad that you made mention of our students. And of course, finally, I'll point you toward the Teaching Tolerance website. It's tolerance.org. And in addition to it just being an abundant set of resources, specifically, I will call your attention to the Do Something assignments. Those include relevant and meaningful tasks that can be done from home. And so it's just important to consider all of our learners right now and all of their entry points to the learning process and access. So we've of course are doing our best to create high quality digital lessons, but we have lots of students who are using choice boards or doing work from home without a computer. And so we've got to include them in terms of how we plan and how we plan effectively and how we ensure that we're providing relevant learning tasks.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, if somebody wants to add on, please do.
Well, to go off the point of not attempting to reduce people to tools, but also going off Shashare's point of, as a classroom educator who teaches in such a diverse district, it really is on you to be a researcher and to do the work to know what is going to be best for our students. But also don't forget, you have on this call 3 of the 6 DEP resource teachers in the chat. We also have Kenita Ballard, Lamanda Moore Rodriguez, and Katia Turner. So you also have people specifically in place to help that work. So if you know within your PLC, you don't have the tools or you don't have the student contact or connection to do that work, you have supports within the district framework that will ensure that racial equity piece, especially during NTI.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know that we are approaching that 20-minute mark, so let's have a look at the next question, and then we will see if there's any burning questions in the chat. But here we have, why does racial equity matter, especially during NTI? I've done way too much talking. I'm going to turn it over to either of my colleagues in the Google Meet here, or on the live stream.
For me, there's never going to be a point in time where racial equity does not matter in this district. It becomes even more vital during NTI, going all the way back to the beginning of this forum. We have students who are situated very differently than what we are necessarily seeing highlighted. We have students who are caregivers to family members or to younger siblings. We have students who are essential workers. So when we are talking about racial equity and when we are talking about why it matters during NTI, not that it isn't always crucial, but it becomes even more important to ensure that we are being equitable to all of our students, regardless of their race or their situation during this time. If we aren't being responsive to those needs, we aren't really teaching the whole child, and we aren't accounting for who they are as people, or the situation that they are finding themselves in presently. And that, as teachers, is our job during this time, is to support their learning.
Dr., anything you'd like to share or add?
I was just waiting to see what you were going to say first, because I don't want to repeat what you were going to say. So you can go ahead, Rachel.
Of course. And I completely agree with Avon where it matters at all times. But I think that this present situation has really brought the meaning of this image to the forefront. And if we were not aware now of systems, my dog is having a lovely bark, systems of oppression and the ways in which school, in the way that it's designed, has upheld a lot of those, we have this opportunity to think about how things can be different. And I don't want to take away from your notes, Josh Ray, in the presentation, but you've got an excellent line in there, and I'm going to turn it to you. You made mention that this is about commitment and not compliance. We've got to be committed to change, and it shouldn't be a box to check. So I'm going to let you wrap up on this one, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, so I think that we have to definitely do some reflecting ourselves as educators and how we were educated, which was actually not through a racial equity lens. I think that we need to reflect on the fact that we have a racial equity policy, and why do we have a racial equity policy? And racial equity matters because when we look at the disproportionality with our Black and Brown students, we see that they are not doing as well as our white students. So racial equity matters if we want to continue to be the educators that say we care about our students.
Thank you for that. As I am the one screen sharing, if you've got an eye on the chat, Avon, do you mind addressing a question or at least sharing it?
So there has not been a direct question, but we did have something interesting brought up that I think relates to this question by Mr. Hockenberry, of a mother in South Bend having to drive to a bus depot to pick up a Wi-Fi signal. So one of the other questions that we've seen, even though it's not been formally asked in the chat, is what are we doing to ensure that that technology divide is being addressed? And that could go for students who don't have internet at home. That could go for ELL families who don't have the appropriate information to have gotten a Chromebook or to have access to Wi-Fi in their home right now.
I too saw.
I
got to see this actual story on the Today Show, and what I really liked about what they said was that this is a time for our school districts and our communities to jump in and help all of these inequities, and making sure that we help those families, as well as the grace period, which, making sure that you are knowledgeable about your students and have that relationship with them. So definitely huge point on that Today Show. And if you didn't get to see it, I'm sure it's on their website as well. But it was very interesting, the length of that, what that mom would do to make sure that her kids were enabled to do what they needed to do for school.
And I also think, too, that it's important that we understand these inequities that we're seeing are not new.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. These inequities are centuries. Really, they are. And I think that this is an important time for teachers to actually dig into the historical factors as to why we are where we are, why we have a racial equity pillar, why we have a racial equity policy, and why racial equity matters. Spend some time researching redlining, gentrification, food deserts, the history of public school and who school was created for. So to me, I think that this time is not to quickly get out information to kids, but gather some information for yourself, so that when we have platforms like this, or we have platforms, we can speak to the reasons why we have these inequities. Until we actually realize that, until we speak up and speak out, that we're going to continue to have them.
And help be the change, making sure that you communicate with your fellow coworkers and help be the change, and do that. Like you said, Shashay, speak up and be the change. And I love that. And I think we have tons of teachers in our district and administrators and that all try to do that. And of course our whole department. And I love that. So.
Well, and to add to that, one thing that we have to be aware of, and this goes directly back to Shasharay's point, these aren't new, but suddenly we're finding innovative ways to address them. So one of the things we have to ask ourselves and really look in the mirror and think through is, why are we just now addressing them when we suddenly have all of these ideas that could have addressed these issues long ago. So it's also on us as teachers and leaders within this district to not backpedal once this situation resolves itself. It is on us to continue pushing because you are seeing these solutions for kids and suddenly school is clicking for them. So it's on us as the teachers in this situation to continue pushing for that change.
Absolutely.
You are so right. I know we could go on and on for quite a while, and I'm thankful for the support that we've received and for everybody who's present today. You'll see who our zone resource teachers are on this slide. And this presentation has been uploaded. So I just want to leave you with these resources. I made reference to the NTIR tool checklist, so that's linked there. And then again,